I'm used to talking to people who have closed eyes or aren't looking at me. So if you could occasionally avert your eyes, I'd be much more comfortable. Also, a pro tip for whenever you need to do some public speaking, when you breathe in and there's a lot of oxygen in your system, you're very energized. When you breathe out and you hold your breath out, the carbon in your system goes up and you calm down. So hold your breath out. Pardon me. So I think it's important to talk about where I've come from for why I got here. But my story is pretty typical in modern Western yoga culture. It's not at all unique. I was raised in the suburbs of Toronto in an incredibly loving family. My mother was very, very devoted to our education, and my whole family was very passionate about encouraging education. My grandfather, Harvey Sr., for whom my son is named, he used to ask me when I came home from school, who's the smartest girl in her class? And I would always gleefully respond that it was me. But as time and socializing teach us, I learned that it was not always wise to be the smartest girl in the room. Because I really wanted the respect of my peers. To be truthful, I wanted to be popular. And I learned that to be popular, you should probably be easygoing and beautiful, which I always interpreted as thin. And so underscoring so much of what I did when I was young was this strong, strong desire to be thin, including asking my doctor when I was in high school for diet pills, which she provided me. But I was pretty creative, and I got some things right. I had some really long-lasting good friendships. I was very expressive of myself. I experimented with different fashion. In 1 year, I managed to have a short purple pixie cut through my pop punk phase. But before the year was out, I was going through business casual. So I ran the gamut, and I told my parents that I wanted to be anything from an interpretive street dancer to a philosopher, for which I had business cards made. And that part I actually have kind of fulfilled. But I went to university, and I loved it. I had a good time, but still, there was this anxiety underlying everything that I did. Even though I was excelling at school, I really wanted to feel beautiful. And so I took up running, and I really think that I was running out of a desire to almost punish myself for what I perceived as a lack of willpower. And so I ran myself through shin splints, and then I ran myself into patellar tracking syndrome. And patellar tracking syndrome is when the muscles on one side of your leg so overstrengthen that it pulled the kneecap of my right leg over to the right side of my leg. And so I completely hobbled myself. And then when I graduated university, I had to wear Clark's artisan shoes to my graduation, which felt really devastating at the time. And so I went home from university for that summer, and my mother was a yoga teacher. She had started practicing when I was in high school, but like any really good teenager, whatever my mother did, I really didn't want any part of. Even though she seemed happier and more present and generally like a better person because of it. But I was going through physio, I was going through acupuncture, and nothing was healing my knee. And so eventually she said the magic words, "Will you try yoga if I pay for it?" So I went and I did a few private yoga classes with her teacher. And the moment I saw this woman, I thought, oh, I respect you. She was good looking, and she had a great outfit on. And so I was introduced to two powers, yoga and Lululemon. Yoga always begins out of need. No one ever really starts yoga because they just have space in their schedule, right? We're always a little stressed out, we have a bum knee. it's the ultimate bait and switch. You come do yoga and you do it for your knee, but you find out that you're a better person on the other side of it, and living with low back pain is a bit of a pill. So I would love to tell you that this is where I got on like the spiritual path and I started doing the good work. But no, I started doing yoga and I chose the most alienating versions I could. Hot power yoga, really just the more demoralizing the better. And I did this many, many times in a week. And then between my master's and my still incomplete PhD, I decided to do my yoga teacher training. And I did it because to me, yoga teachers were these sexy, powerful beings. And I thought, I think I could do that, and I'd like to look like you. So I go and do my yoga teacher training. And during my training, my wonderful teacher, Mona, does a session on affirmations. And at this point, I'm feeling very confident in life. Like I really feel like I know where I'm going, and I can do a headstand. And so during this session, I raise my hand and I say, what if your life is already really good? And she received my hubris with such grace and said, I'm so pleased your life is good, Kathryn. Maybe keep this in your back pocket for a time when your life is not so good. So I end up moving on. I decide that I'm going to leave my PhD, and I go into wine marketing. And then I'm doing wine marketing, and then a connection with a friend leads me to a job in Toronto, which I feel like in her early career, Anne Hathaway probably would have had this job in a movie. Like it's incredible. I work in luxury brand loyalty marketing, and I curate experiences for the ultra privileged. So we would go to professional tracks and we would try very fancy cars around the track, which is truly terrifying. I would host wine tastings. I flew around the country. I got to go to the best restaurants. I only regret not getting a photo with one person. I got to have dinner with Kofi Annan. I got to find things for clients that they couldn't find for themselves, and I managed to get a signed copy of Stephen King's yet-to-be-released novel. And I actually found I achieved most of that by asking the right people who I should ask next, and always in a really kind, open way. And that usually got me what I was looking for. But this job was very satisfying. Right? Everybody wanted my business card. And on the surface level, it was very satisfying. I had a wonderful team. The travel was very sexy. But I made the decision to move into digital marketing. And so I moved into deep digital marketing for another mega brand. And on the outside, everything looked really good. I earned the most money I ever earned. I had a glossy partner with a glossy job. And from the outside, everything looked great and enviable. I had got what I wanted, and I was so sad on the inside. It just felt terrible. And so through fate and action, I blew up the core pillars of my life. I never had any intention of being a full-time yoga teacher. That was never my plan. I got packaged out. So I got packaged out, and all along I'd been teaching yoga, and I'd been cultivating my own curiosity and delving into different things that yoga had to offer. So when I got packaged out, a few people came to me and said, we'd like you to do this training, we'd like you to do this workshop. And so I was offered a way to do yoga in a sustainable, interesting, fulfilling way. And that was about 5 years ago. Now, no one wants my business card. When I'm at dinner parties and people find out what I do, they usually tell me that they should do yoga, but they're not flexible, or that it must be nice to work out for a living, or they go, and then look for someone else to have a chat with. But how I am for other people finally has harmonized with how I am for myself. There is this consistency across my life that is really very satisfying. So I thought, since this is what I do for a living, we would do a little bit of we would do a little bit of yoga, and the yoga that I like to teach. So in modern Western yoga, we like to study two texts in particular. One is the Bhagavad-Gita, and the Gita is the song of the Lord because it's typically sung in verses called shlokas. And this is extracted from a longer work called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is this incredible story where there's lots going on and there's many characters and there's a war at hand. And at the heart of the war are two factions of the same family arguing over who should ascend the throne, so who should rule. And at the heart of this story is Prince Arjuna. And Prince Arjuna is fighting his cousins for his older brother's right to rule. But he's despondent because he feels it is right for his brother to rule, but he does not feel that it is right for him to kill his cousins to achieve that. So they've tried everything. They've tried talking, they've tried negotiating, and he's so depressed that he comes to his knees and he says, "These are all terrible choices, what am I to do?" And his charioteer reveals himself to be an avatar of the Lord Vishnu called Krishna in this incarnation. And Krishna says to him, "Look, let's talk about the nature of being. Let's talk about how we should live in the world so that you can make this decision." Doesn't talk with him about the content of this decision, talks with him about how to live in the world. And one of the things he says to him is, "At the beginning of time, I declared two paths for the pure heart. Jnana Yoga, the contemplative path of spiritual wisdom, and Karma Yoga, the active path of selfless service. One who shirks action does not attain freedom. No one can gain perfection by abstaining from work. Indeed, there is no one who rests for even an instant. All creatures are driven to action by their own nature. Those who abstain from action while allowing the mind to dwell on sensual pleasure cannot be called sincere spiritual aspirants, but they excel who control their senses through the mind, using them for selfless service. Fulfill all your duties. Action is better than inaction. Even to maintain your body, Arjuna, you are obliged to act. Selfish action imprisons the world. Act selflessly without thought of personal profit." So this is how we should live in the world. The second text I mentioned is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And Patanjali is synthesizing multiple schools of yogic thought into one text. It's prescriptive if it's minimally descriptive. Sutras means thread, so they're short and pithy. But he's basically laying out the path to enlightenment. If you'd like to be enlightened, here's what you need to do. And some of the things that you need to do include taking care of the mind-body vehicle that's going to allow you to do the practices to achieve enlightenment. And this is where the yoga that you're familiar with, the organized stretching classes, this is where we start to see a reference to that specifically. Yoga asana really means seat. It means the seat of meditation, but it's come to be used as yoga postures. You can participate in yoga and meditation as a tool for your own well-being without being on the path. You can do great evil in the world by doing meditation and yoga. You'll just do it with more focus and more vigor. Just because you do the practices doesn't mean you're on the path. That would be like saying the car is the road trip. The car is the vehicle, the road trip is the path and the journey. Yoga has a sister system called Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is the wisdom of life. So if yoga says, do these practices to achieve enlightenment, Ayurveda says, here's how you're going to take care of your vehicle. You're going to eat this kind of food. You're going to wake up at this time. You'll put this kind of oil on it. We like to put oil on things. And every day you're supposed to wake up and go through sense organ cleansing rituals. And I like it because it actually is very intentional, because you clean your eyes. And to me that says, I'm going to see things clearly today. You clean your ears, I'm going to hear things correctly today. It's all about having a healthy relationship with reality. Because yoga and Ayurveda say that you consume energy not just through what you eat, which is how we think of it here. We eat food, we get energy, we move on. But yoga and Ayurveda say that you consume through what you listen to, touch, taste, smell, and through what you see. And I feel like a lot of you probably see a lot in a day. And yoga and Ayurveda say that if you take in too much and you do not starve your senses, if you do not close your eyes, if you do not take time to be quiet with yourself, you wind up with literally the undigested, ama, A-M-A, ama, the undigested. And that's what leads to disease of mind and body. Just in case you don't believe me, 25% of Canadians spend an additional 2 hours on their phone outside of work hours. That number goes up to 50% when you look under the age of 34. So, let's set you up for your day, shall we? If it's safe to do so, close your eyes. And go ahead and close your eyes and then relax the pressure to have a particular facial expression. Take a very long breath in through your nose. And then audibly sigh out your mouth. Do that again. Breathe in. Sigh out. Last time for now. Breathe in. Up, 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 up. Sigh out. Your mind-body gets very good at what it does all the time. You're very accustomed to being extroverted. And that's totally, totally natural in our day and age. But your brain reacts to things that it's unfamiliar with, typically with the desire to escape those things. So the more you learn to sit with yourself, the easier it gets. But I know that in the beginning, it's almost anxiety-inducing. I get that. So for me, my life was not lined up with what I truly valued. And there's a pile of research that shows that when we act out of line with what we say we value, this causes us distress. And so while I would love for you to all join me in the practical footwear, meditation, loose clothing camp, you're welcome anytime. There are many tools of yoga and meditation that you can use to live a calmer, more present life. Based on the theme of intention, I thought I would talk about affirmations and mantra. And they're a little bit different, but they've been blended in our modern culture to kind of mean the same thing. Affirmations are statements that connect you with your core values. And in the whole positive psychology kick, there's very interesting research being done in the behavioral sciences lab at Carnegie Mellon. There was a study that looked at students who had persistent chronic stress. And it looked at them because their persistent chronic stress made them perform very badly on exams, solving fewer than 50% of problem-solving questions. What they did was they took these students and they gave them the opportunity to look at affirmations, to connect with their core values prior to writing problem-solving exams. And going through that process allowed them to perform as well or better than their less stressed peers. There's another study that they did where they worked the 10 Commandments into the beginning of an exam where students were supposed to self-assess, so they were going to grade themselves. Even if the students weren't Christian, if they didn't identify that way, simply looking at ethical values before they did self-assessment had them rate themselves honestly. Whereas students who did not have ethical reminders in their exams were more generous in their representation of themselves, which is a pleasant way of saying they cheated. So, we can either bend our morals to fit our actions, or our actions can be informed by what we say we value. And we live in an accountability-heavy community right now. Does anyone have one of those journals that encourages you to check off all the vegetables and the water that you've had in that day. It's too much pressure. You can keep this light. You can post affirmations around your life. I like them in high traffic areas like my bathroom mirror, my car dashboard. They can get a bit long for computer passwords, but be the change is a good one. So here are two that I like. Grace is the approach to difficulties I cannot avoid. And kindness is the deepest truth. You could whittle it down to a few words. Curiosity and grace are two of my core values that I check in with. A mantra is a little bit different. Mantra is a compound Sanskrit word, and it breaks down to man from manas, which is Sanskrit for mind, and tra, or vehicle. So a mantra is a vehicle for the mind. It's to help you harness and focus the mind during meditation. This is a mantra from Buddhism. It's initially written in Pali, so it's called a metta-meditation. Pali is the ancient language of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And so it comes into English as a compound word. It comes into English as loving kindness meditation. But it's a really generous one to do with yourself before bed if your mind is very busy. It's also a very generous one when people are being frustrating. So if you're having a difficult meeting or if someone cuts you off in traffic, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live with ease. It'll help. So again, please find yourself a sustainable seated position for a moment, and if it's safe to do so, close your eyes. Rest your hands somewhere where they feel restful and purposeful. And again, connect with your breath. I'm going to say the phrase. Internally, you're going to repeat it to yourself. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. Before we close, take a moment to connect with your core value. What is it that you want to inform your day? You have to do the bank, you have to do work, you have to do the parenting. But what is the thing that underwrites all of it? It did not seem right for me to not include Harvey in some way. I wanted to bring him today, but he would have been too excited about this microphone cord. And this is really the sum total of what I have learned, is that if you look outside yourself for indicators of happiness, you might look happy, but on the inside, you may not be nourished. The work you need to do might not be truly vitalized. And so we all have to fulfill our roles, and sometimes those roles are demanding, and sometimes they're not always desirable. But underscoring it should really be the intention that we want to live with, the affirmations and the core values that we say that we value, because it'll help us show up for the people who matter in the way that they deserve to. Thank you so very much for listening. It was a privilege to teach.
You talked about the road trip. So a road trip is more fun with friends, right? And but what happens if you're driving that car alone, right? You talk about accountability. We're in this world of, this world right now is one of accountability, and I don't know, maybe through apps, but not necessarily through friendships. If everybody is on their own road trip, doing their own thing, they're going to different destinations. Where's that community?
I think that is the question that yoga studios and Buddhist communities are trying to answer. And I don't know that we're doing it perfectly yet, but we're still early in this journey, in this iteration of this journey. But I think that, especially for those of us who are secular in our beliefs, we don't have ritual, we don't have calendar punctuations that bring us all together that are devoid of like a hefty dose of consumerism. And I think this leaves us spiritually impoverished. And so this is why group practice is so important, because the practices are down-regulating, so they help you cope with the stress in your life, but they're also co-regulating. They're done in community, which is why I think it's so important that we make eye contact and we learn one another's names and we talk with one another about more than just the practice. Yeah.
Could you please elaborate further, on what you mean by grace? As you mentioned, grace is the...
Oh, yes. Yes, what do I mean by grace? It ends up, yogis like to talk a lot about non-attachment, and I find that we usually float through life thinking like, God, I'm so not attached, until we don't get something we want. Right, because of course that's when the practice comes up. And for me, I just always thought, because I'm so curious and because I'm driven, I just always thought that I was one more piece of information, one more day, one more practice from being able to figure it all out with such clarity that I could prevent things from going wrong, and I could prevent myself from ever having to feel uncomfortable, angry, fearful, jealous, all of those things. So for me, it's balancing progress and practice with acceptance that flaws and inconveniences and discomforts are part of the human experience, and making space for those. So living with enough margin that I'm not trampled by them. Just before I hand it over to Maxine, thank you again. I know you weren't expecting a philosophy lesson, so thank you.